Hi everybody, it's Mrs. Colsty, your picture lady. I want to say first of all how much I miss you and I love you and I can't wait to get back in the classroom to do some art with you guys. I hope you're staying healthy and well and taking good care of your families. In the meantime, until I get to see you again in person, I figured I would post some art that maybe you want to do at home. I'm going to start with a fun and simple one that you should be able to do mostly independently, but you might need a little help gathering supplies from your parents. Okay, so the artist we're going to study today is a modern artist, and his name is Paul Klee. He lived from 1879 until 1940, and that's a picture of him. And as I always say during our art lessons, when you get to an artist who lived in the 1900s, you're getting pretty modern in art. This is a relatively recent artist that we'll be studying today. So let me tell you just a little bit about Paul Klee. He was born in Switzerland, and when he was in his early 20s, he moved to Germany to study at the Munich Academy of Fine Art. He studied a lot of great artists, some of whom we have studied together in the past. He loved Cézanne and Matisse and Van Gogh, and he strived to have a modern style, even more modern than some of those that I just mentioned. He was very active in what was called the Blue Rider German Expressionist movement, and he did some expressionist displays of art in Germany along with several other very famous artists at the time. He began teaching at what was called the Bauhaus School in Dusseldorf. If you see my kitty, she's joining us for the art lesson. That's okay. Anyway, so he studied and taught at the Bauhaus Art Institute, which was a very famous art school. Now in 1933, some of you have studied the lead up to World War II, and you know that Hitler came to prominence in Germany in World War II, in the period leading up to World War II. Because Paul Klee was such a modern, funky, interesting, kind of kooky artist, Hitler and the Nazi Party did not like him. They tried to embarrass him. They tried to run him out of Germany. They called his art degenerate, which means really bad, really immoral and ugly. Of course, we know now that his art was nothing like that. His art is beautiful and interesting and fun, and thank goodness we get to study it here in 2020. He finally escaped to Switzerland back home for the end of his life, and he ended up dying in 1940, just before the Americans got involved in World War II. So that's our history of our artist, Paul Klee. He was apparently a very nice man and very interesting. Let me show you some of the art that he produced. As you can see, it's very modern. It is not realistic in style. This is not like a detailed portrait of a human being. This is art full of colors and geometric shapes, and they give you the idea of what they are supposed to be without being a realistic, detailed drawing of it. So you can see what we are going to produce today will have a lot of color and some shape and hopefully just be a lot of fun. Here's the painting that we are going to be inspired by today. It's called Fish Magic. And that's what we'll be trying to sort of produce in a simple way. Here's my example. This is Mrs. Colsty's Fish Magic. As you can see, it's got a lot of bright colors, some geometric shapes, and it's just sort of modern in the way that Paul Klee would have produced. Here's the material you're going to need. So if you need to pause on this screen to go gather everything, you'll need a blank white piece of paper. It could be construction paper, or it could just be printer paper from your computer. You'll need a crayon. I'm going to use a black crayon, but you can really use any color that you have available. Hopefully you have some watercolor paints at home. You'll need a small paintbrush, a cup for water for your watercolors, and maybe a paper towel. You might want to have that nearby. Now make sure when you're working at home that you're working on a surface that can get some watercolor paint on it. So ask Mom and Dad, where's the best place to work? You might want to put a great big paper bag underneath it or a plastic trash bag underneath it so you don't ruin your kitchen table. So make sure you ask first, where's the best place for you to work? So here's my white piece of paper, and I've already dripped a little water on it, and that's okay. Okay, so here's how I'm going to start. Come around with me and look at me as I get started. Here's my sample. And what I'm going to do is start with my black crayon. Again, it can be any color crayon that you have. And we're going to start making the fish. Now, what we're producing today is called a crayon resist painting because we start with the crayon, and then when we go back over with the watercolor resists sticking to the crayon. So it resists it. It's a crayon resist painting. So we'll start with our fish, and I like to start at the tail, and I think of it just as a straight line down, and I'm pushing a little hard so that the wax really gets there so the paint will resist it later. And then I make what I think of as mostly a figure 8. So I'm going to come up and around, and then I finish my 8 by coming back and connecting to my line of the top of the tail. And that's my fish shape. My next step is to give him a big eyeball. And it's just a circle, and then I fill it in with a filled in pupil. Now I'm going to demarc where his head is. So I go just, a fingertip length away from his eyeball and make a little semicircle. And then I'm going to do the line that marks his top half from his bottom half, and I did a little wavy line because this is modern art and I figure it would be wavy. And then I give him some lines in his tail so he's got some definition to his tail. And there's our fish, and you can see my hands are sweating as they always do during our art lesson, so I'm getting my paper very wet. That's okay though, because it's gonna be watercolors. Next, I'm going to color in some interesting geometry inside the shape of the fish. So I chose to do horizontal lines inside his head. So and where his eyeball is, I let it split the line in half, and I just make a series of horizontal lines. Inside the top half, I'll do one kind of shape. Inside the bottom half, I'll do a second kind of shape, and it can be any shape you want. Here, I just did U's with dots inside. And in the top half of him, I just did a bunch of E's, some of them facing up, some of them facing down, some of them facing backwards, just a series of E's. All right, so now we're ready to move on to the area outside of the fish's body, and we're going to divide that into 4 areas of color. You could do 5 if you want to. So the way I'm going to do this is just draw lines to divide my paper. Here's one section. Here's another section. Here's a big section. And there's my 4th section. And inside each of those 4 sections, I do another kind of repetitive geometric shape. And it can be anything you want. It does not have to be lines with dots or hourglasses or stars or curlicues. You could do the number 1 over and over again. You could do circles over and over again. You can do any shape you prefer. I just chose some simple ones that stand out to fill each shape, each division for the page. So this part I did the lines with the dots. Here I'm going to do some curlicues. Here I do some stars all filled in. And again, I am working fast here. I don't expect you to work this fast. You might want to push pause on the video so that you can stop and work and take a little more time. I'm trying to work quickly. Okay, so that is our crayon part of the crayon resist. Now we're ready to do our watercolors where we add the bright, vibrant colors. So hopefully you have some watercolors on hand. Your watercolors probably come with a little skinny brush that's got a tiny little tip. That works perfectly. I'm going to use a brush that has a slightly wider tip just so I can work more quickly here for the video, but any kind you have will work just fine. So I chose to make his face, his head part, red. And all you do is try to stay within that part of his body and don't go over his eyeball. And you can see the way you can go right over your lines of black crayon or whatever crayon color you used because the watercolor resists sticking to the crayon. So there he's got a nice red head. And then I clean the red off my brush, and I chose to make his eyeball yellow. It can be any color you like. And I'm just gonna go over that. And then I'm gonna even touch it just a little with my paper towel because I want his pupil to show a little better than it was. And there's his eyeball. I chose to do orange here. So I fill in his bottom half with orange. Just like so. Now, the more watery you get your paint, the lighter the color orange will be. If you go back and touch the orange without re-watering your brush, you'll get a more vibrant, bright orange. So it just depends on how bright you want your color to be. I'm going to switch to purple for his top half. And just spread it out. And as it dries, that'll lighten up just a little and you'll see those funky E's in there just right. And then you go on and finish the rest of his body and do each one of the sections outside his body in a different color. Now, one thing I want you to notice, I used blue here in his tail. So I didn't use blue again in a section that touched the blue because I didn't want blue on blue. So I used green and yellow. So I tried to never have two of the same colors touching each other because I just found that that looked more vibrant and beautiful. And then as you can see, here's your final product. Once you finish all of the sections with a different color, there it is. And when it's all dry, it should only take 30 minutes or so to dry. And you can mount it on a piece of construction paper as a background, and then you'll have a beautiful work of art to hang in your house. I'll see you guys for our next lesson. I love you. Take care. Have fun. Bye.